Hello, everyone. I know people are just joining and connecting to audio. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Very excited to have you all here. We'll begin in just a minute. I heard it's good weather out there today in New York. For those of you who are in New York, is that true? It's nice.
It was nice. It rained a little bit, but the temperature felt pretty comfortable.
It
A
was
little humid.
really
Where
warm
are
here.
you?
I'm in New York, but I have not left my house all day today.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
So
Well,
I will
out
see.
in Suffolk
Where are you
County, it's
going?
pretty warm.
Yes.
Where are you
Okay.
going?
Going to Rochester for a weekend to visit some friends. So wish me luck. Enjoy it, and hopefully it'll still be nice weather. Well, if everybody's okay, I think maybe I should start. What do you think, Robbie?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's go. I am so excited to be here. And we are already recording, I think, which is great. Fantastic. So thank you all for coming to this Inform Your Community event. It is one in our Know It All series, which is a speaker series. We have 4 wonderful speakers here with us today who will be our kind of panelists for our Q&A. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm white female with blondish, grayish, some odd color hair, still trying to sort it out, and a gray shirt over a blue shirt. That's what I'm wearing today. For those who can't see me, and we do have closed caption available, so you can turn that on for yourselves if you're interested in doing so. At Inform Your Community, we offer events that are supposed to be providing impactful information along with having some fun while you're here. And you can find out more about Inform Your Community and the events we offer at our website, www.informyourcommunity.org. You can also find our social media links on the bottom of that website as well. And if you're watching this in video form, please be sure to like us and to subscribe as well. And please spread the word and sign up for our mailing list while you're on our website. There's also going to be a donate link there. And of course, we try to keep our events, we've always kept our events free, and we plan to do so into the future. But if you can afford to donate, we appreciate it so that we can continue to keep our events free. So DEI is an important topic. DEI meaning diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's an important topic for many, many reasons. Historically, minoritized populations have been excluded from leadership positions in organizations, in the workplace, and decision-making processes. So DEI helps to kind of facilitate a more level playing field. It's just a framework to do that. It doesn't prescribe how to do that exactly. And so different companies will do that in different ways. But the idea is to help with that situation. 84% of respondents in a recent survey reported experiencing microaggressions in the workplace as well. So it's not only about that imbalance in that C-suite level, but it's also just being about more inclusive with the people that you're working with. And who work with you. And so it's a very important topic for us today. As I mentioned, this is part of our Know It All series. The Know It All series is a speaker series, but we have lots of other programs. Here today, we're going to have our 4 speakers who will discuss this important topic. Today we have as our facilitator, Robbie Copley, who is here. Hey,
Hi,
Robbie.
everyone.
You'll see lots of him as we go along. And we have Tyler on tech. So if you have any technical issues, please feel free to message Tyler as well. So thank you, Tyler, for helping out with tech. Throughout the discussion, if you have any questions, please feel free to, thanks for the thumbs up, Tyler. Feel free to raise your hand like Tyler's doing with that little emoji. There's a raise hand emoji. You can ask a question that way, or in the chat. You can also ask questions in the chat, and Tyler will keep an eye on that and make sure your questions get heard, as well as Robbie and I trying to do that as well. So without further ado, we're going to have Robbie, who is going to introduce our panelists, or maybe allow them a minute to introduce themselves. And I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say about this important topic. Thank you.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Stacy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am just going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Robbie. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with orange fluffy hair, and I'm wearing a kind of greenish flannel shirt. And I'm just in my living room here, if you can't see, and I have a few plants behind me and a few fancy pillows. And I'm joined by four wonderful guests who I will let introduce themselves. Edy Penn, Karthi Veeramani, Sanae Elmoudden, and Jessica Meyer, who you might remember from past events, Jessica. But Edy, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edy Penn. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Black American woman with, it's red today. My hair's red today. It's very shortcut. I'm sitting in front of a bookcase and some curtains, and I have on a white shirt, white sleeveless shirt with cute little leaves on it that are barely painted pink, vaguely. I am an attorney and a people and DEI professional. I've been doing this work for the better part of 20 years. I am the founder and CEO of Penn Squared Consulting, which helps organizations in their organizational leadership and culture initiatives, including DEIA.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. And then maybe Karthi. Hi, Karthi. Oh, I think you're muted. There you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karthi. I use she, her pronouns. I am based out of Jersey City, New Jersey, and I am currently wearing also a white blouse that is sleeveless. It technically has like small lace sleeves, but sort of sleeveless. It's like a combo. And I am I've invented or created this word, this phrase to describe myself. I am triply diasporic. I was born in Malaysia, raised in Singapore and the United States. And I'm also 100% Indian, like full Tamilian, South Indian, unapologetically. So I consider myself triply diasporic, and I've been in the ops world pretty much since I got out of school. I accidentally tripped into this world and have never left. I've been working in education nonprofits for almost a decade, nearing a decade, and have done a lot of processes, policy related work, and I've centered DEI in all of my work and fully inspired by my background in post-colonial studies and critical race theory. So.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Haven't seen you in a while. It's good to see you. And Jessica, maybe you can go next. I think you're muted.
Keep on forgetting to do that. My name is Jessica Meyer. I am a white woman with reddish hair and red glasses with a blue shirt with flowers all over it in different colors, wearing earrings. I am sitting in front of a Duchamp painting and a piece of art, and I am Jewish and disabled. So Asamayak, everybody, it's Passover. Yay. Yeah. And so happy freedom. Because that's how I identify Passover today as a week of freedom. So it's a week of celebrating freedom. So anyway, how did I get into this field? I got into this field because I was a person with a disability, and I really wasn't finding jobs, so I created my own career for myself, and I do training on disability issues for companies and that's what I do. And
Very
it's
cool.
DEI work. The DEI work. So
Awesome. Well, congratulations. Happy Passover. And thank you for being here. And I'm not sure if Sanae is able to join just yet, because I think they were mentioning they had some trouble with unmuting. So Sanae,
She's working on it and she should be
Okay.
in shortly. So we'll introduce her at our first opportunity.
okay. So I will just jump into some Q&A to get us started. First, does anyone have a different definition of DEI than the one Stacy said? Or does anybody have kind of anything, is there anything missing in that or any way to broaden that? Or how would you, Edy, why don't we start with you? How would you define DEI?
Of course, you're going to start with me because I'm actually really adamant about. First, I guess I want to say I think about this at the organizational level because that's how I do my consulting. That's how I do my work. And I think that every organization honestly should have its own definition of what DEI means to them as an organization, because what it looks different at organization A than it does at organization B. I'll give a really good example. Most organizations call it DEI. If you heard me say during my introduction, I actually call myself a DEIA practitioner. And part of the reason for that is because I worked with an organization where 20% of the staff was disabled in some way, shape, or form. And so learning accessibility issues became a very serious part of my practice. And so for them, that A is a big part. And depending on the type of disabilities of the staff is going to depend on how they define A in their particular DEIA alphabet soup. So I don't really have my own operating definition in terms of doing work with people. I say, what is your definition? Let's build a definition for your organization, and then let's go from there.
Brilliant. Anybody else? How do you define it?
To me, diversity is natural, inclusion is not.
Mhm.
And when you talk about inclusivity, you talk about people who not only look different than you, but who think different than you. Like, I'm going to give an example of this. As Robbie's already heard the story, but I'm going to bore the rest of you with it. My mother died during the pandemic. And, and I wasn't eating. My neighbor, who is an Orthodox Jew, brought me food. She was lovely to me. She is very conservative, very Republican, but she's still a lovely person. Do I argue with her about politics? No, of course not, because it would be silly for me to do that. So the acceptance of our differences is not based on anything but politics.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an interesting way of looking at what we do as more than just race, gender, sexual orientation, disability. Difference in thought, it's difference in the way people communicate with each other too. So
So it's kind of like everyone deserves a seat at the table, even people we vehemently disagree with.
Right.
Which that's probably the hardest one for me, to be honest.
Right. It is very difficult.
How about you, Karthi? Oh, and Sanae, I see you're here. Maybe we'll just let you introduce yourself since you're on screen.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. I'm sorry. I don't know how you introduce yourselves, but I'm Sanae Elmoudden. I am from St. John's University. I'm an associate professor there. I use the pronoun she, her. And I think, do we describe ourselves or?
Yeah, that would be nice to give you a little description, and then also tell us how you got involved in DEI work or where you fit into the DEI world.
Okay, so I am light skinned. I'm originally from Morocco, actually, so I've got a lot of things going for me. And the reason I got involved in this, because it's personal to begin with, because of my skin color and all of that. But also, I am a mother of a child who lives with invisible disability or mental illness, schizoaffective. And I think you were talking about this before I get in. So I think that everybody, that diversity is part of, it's skin diversity, it's skin color diversity, but it's also brain diversity. And that's important for me to talk about it. And that's the reason that I am involved, and that's why I'm here today as well.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. And maybe you could also tell us what you think. When you think of DEI, do you add other letters to the acronym? Edy was saying, like, she often puts an A, or at least in one context, put an A on it to highlight accessibility. Like, how do you define DEI?
I think, I mean, inclusion, it's enough in a way, as long as when we think about inclusion, we think about a broader sense of inclusion, not just limited to race or ethnicity or religion. But usually what we tend to do is limit it to one of these things, and therefore it does not include other things. And so I think as it stands is enough, as long as we broaden the definition and the ideologies and ideas that go behind it. I mean, yeah, you see a lot of things like the G or B for belonging and all of that, but I feel that all of those things are included in the acronym, as long as we expand on the definition. When we start talking about it, we include all of these things that are part of this inclusion, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Edy also said that it was that one context where a lot of folks had accessibility issues, that in that context, it was like, okay, we're going to discuss A a lot. We're going to keep A as a big part of this. So that makes sense to kind of, maybe adjust given the context. Okay, so Karthi, you're the last one to tell us what you think about DEI.
So to me, the equity piece is really important, because I function with the baseline acceptance and understanding that we live in a supremacist world, and we live in a system, an institution, government, social structure that is built for one power dominant group.
Mm-hmm.
And that system was established as part of colonialism, right? The access that other diverse groups had was erased as part of colonialism. So for example, in India, art forms were abolished so that we couldn't express ourselves. The idea of the gender binary is a big one, right? In many, many cultures across the world, it is post-colonialism where we, accepted the binary as the norm, man versus woman. In many, many cultures, there are multiple gender identities. In Indian courts, trans folks occupied important governmental roles. And now they're reduced to literally fighting for ways to survive in the world. So with that, with colonization erasing avenues for diverse folks, and with my understanding of okay, this system is built for one specific type of person, then my work really elevates and focuses on creating space for folks who will not have a voice at the table, right? The dominant groups the groups with power, even if they're not represented at the table, they will still have impact. But other marginalized groups do not have institutional social power, and unless represented at the table, will not get a say in, will not have any form of representation. So with that baseline understanding is where I do DBIE work, the B meaning belonging. And it goes back to what, Jessica was saying, inclusion is not natural, diversity is natural, inclusion is not. And we need to make intentional effort to create that inclusion, and not just as like a, checkbox of like, yep, there's one Black person here, there's one queer person here. And instead of that, actually internalized, conscious, authentic belonging, a culture where, especially in a workplace, I can come in and be unapologetically myself and not have to hide parts of my culture, and the way I celebrate holidays, or I carry myself in the world and conform to the white supremacist standard. So I think creating space for us to constantly subvert white supremacist norms is where I begin my DBIE work from.
I mean, it's really heavy. So I wonder, like, I love everything you just said. And I wonder, is it any different when you're actually, introducing this concept, like when you're in the room with all these usually white men at a board table or whatever, and you're having to explain this? Like, do you use this language, the way you just described it? And what's the response,
Ooh, you got to the tough bit right away. Yeah, this conversation is absolutely not easy, and it is unfortunate but very true that, at least in my experience, I should say, the emotional labor ends up on the marginalized folks doing the work, not even the allies, but the marginalized folks doing the work. And it is a real-time, everyday experience for me, like in all the spaces that I occupy. The idea of systemic oppression and institutional, right, a supremacist institution is, I think, something that folks feel but don't necessarily know how to articulate, because it does have a very heavy academic background, right? And that in itself is also could be problematic. And I think depending on who we're speaking with, one piece is, like, a lot of marginalized folks don't necessarily understand systemic oppression, right? For example, my own father will be like, well, if you work hard, it will all be fine. Not so simple, right? And he's also an immigrant in the United States, and our experiences, right? And so starting with our shared lived experiences and explaining just to my parents, helping them understand what Black Lives Matter means, took me, I think I started when I was 18 years old. It's been more than a decade. And now my dad's like, when there are incidents of police brutality, he's like, well, that's really wrong. Right? And he's like, it took me 10 years with my own family. And it is a constant conversation. It is not, I have one chat and this switch flips and suddenly they're going to practice diversity and equity. I am currently dealing with some, in one of the spaces I occupy, someone who is deeply defensive, right? The idea of white fragility is really, like, it's very, very prominent in my life right now. And one of the feedback they gave me was, well, I'm now so scared to speak that because I will be labeled privileged. And that is the reality of this work. And it's like this constant conversation, it's this constant dialogue, and somewhere down the road, maybe something will click. And that's why in a workplace we have these goals. We wanna we have these work streams and want to achieve this project deadline, and also be equitable about it. And that's where so much of the tension comes in. And to be fair, it is that emotional labor we did not get paid for. We get paid for the deliverables, but not the emotional labor we end up doing to make a process equitable and inclusive. I hope that's somewhat answered the question. It's a non-answer.
No,
It's
yeah.
complicated and it's hard.
It sounds it. It sounds it.
And the
Jessica?
thing about it is, how do you change people's minds and their attitudes? And when they're so stuck on what their beliefs are. And like one time I was doing a training and this woman said, was like 20 years ago, so a lot of the technologies like smartphones didn't exist, but a lot of them did. And she said, I was going to hire this deaf woman, but she couldn't use the phone. And I said, well, could she use the a TTY machine? Could she chat on a computer? Could she use like instant messaging? She does things differently than you do, but the product may be as equal or better.
Right.
So
It's like she's capable of doing the job if she has the tools.
yeah. So, but she didn't get the job because this woman said she can't use the phone, so therefore she can't do the job. So it was like a light bulb moment for her. And she said, wow, I never really thought about it that way before. Well, how long have we been talking about this, And that's the frustration, I think, that we all share in doing this work, is that we've just been talking about it for so long. And the results that we see are so low.
Yeah.
That the burnout is so high. Anyway.
Well, that brings up another interesting question, which is, when did DEI enter the conversation as a framework or a way of thinking or a strategy?
So can I take this question? Actually, it's kind of interesting. I relate it to like my existence in America, basically. And I came here when I was very young, 16 or something like that. And I came from Morocco. Nobody knew what Morocco was. So if you like the whole idea of inclusion, like whether it's about race or ethnicity or anything like that, to me, it's all the same, honestly, because we're trying to include people from different marginalized groups. And how do you do it in a way that you don't stop the dialogue? Because a lot of times when we talk about these key academic words, privilege and all of that, then it stops the dialogue, even in academia itself. I've seen it with my students, and we're teaching these things, but then they don't want to go forward, for instance, when I got in the US, not just me or like others from Morocco, and we all have different stories to tell, right? When I got known, I was known after 9/11 as a terrorist, so now I am visible, but I am a terrorist, right? As a Muslim person from a different country. So around that time, I think after 9/11, and I felt that at that moment, even though we were called terrorists, there was something about inclusion that is starting to evolve, that the unseen at least in race and ethnicity and in culture and religion, start to become seen to some extent, at that moment. And obviously, the 2020 and the whole, George Floyd, I believe that that's the moment, at least, that it become about where the white folks start asking questions about, well, what can we do, as if they have never known what, people have been saying these things forever, obviously, prior to my existence in America, but they have not seen it until then. And I think a lot of it is because we were all sitting at home and we had nothing better to do. So we all focused on the same thing. And this was global, right? It's not just something that the US had to deal with. We all seen it from different parts. And that kind of pushed this whole idea. And I mean, in academia, I see it now. A lot of people are trying to include different, like backgrounds, different books that have not been there, etc. And again, the key emphasis are trying, because they write letters about, well, we're going to do this, and then things calm down and we go back into that cycle. So hopefully that cycle is going to be erupted and or disturbed. Disrupted, so that we move forward with the inclusions that is not just about, again, to me, this is very important. When we talk about diversity, we should not just think about it from the social identity perspective, but also anything that has to do with our brain, because there's so much diversity in our brain and we just don't even bring it to these conversations.
Mm.
Yeah, I guess what I would add to that is, I think the question you asked, Robbie, is the one about whether do we think that when did DEI really enter the conversation as a way to think about managing organizations?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is it hasn't yet, right? Like it's part of the conversation, but not the conversation as a way to think about managing organizations. DEI in too many organizations is still an initiative. It's still this side piece. It's still this project that we're going to do over here, where we're going to have this subcommittee, we're going to do this thing. But if we're talking about, like, how long have we been talking about diversifying? Well, forever, from desegregation to, affirmative action and including women. And most of those things came by through the law. Like, people didn't just decide they were going to one day just be gracious and start allowing people who thought or looked different from them into their spaces. They were forced to do it. And even when they were forced to do it, they still didn't do it, right? And so even till this day, I think part of the challenge that we have is when people think of diversity, they're still thinking about the fact, does everybody in the room look the same? Because if they don't, well, then yay, like we've done it. And, one of the things that as a people professional that I hone in on a lot are, like, some of these organizations have like these mentorship programs, which are essentially assimilation programs. They'll have, a white male executive or some other person of the majority kind of mentor this, young Black queer woman for the purpose of her becoming more like him, so that she can finally be a chief or finally move into those spaces. It's not about actually hearing the voice of the perspective of somebody who looks different from you, who's had a different upbringing and background than you, who may bring a different perspective. Like, we're not there. We still haven't done that yet.
Mm.
Also, people with disabilities are least likely to have jobs. So, what is it, like 70% of people with disabilities don't work, which is like dumb, because I think that what Edy said about bringing some stuff to the table, ramps aren't just good for wheelchairs. They help with people who have baby carriages and luggage on wheels. And I do this whole program around saying ramps aren't just for wheelchairs anymore. So, when when the ADA was built, it was built around people with disabilities, but you know, closed captioning is used in gyms and restaurants,
Mhm.
you know. So
Mhm.
we invent stuff, you guys use it, and then we don't get the credit for it. So, you know, and
Well, that's interesting you brought up ADA because I was thinking, does DEI have its roots, in like, it seems, it has its roots in the civil rights movement, in the ADA, which came a little bit later. And also, I think it was JFK who started the first federal affirmative action programs.
yeah,
Um,
I'm not sure.
anyway, but interesting. And after hearing Edy, I'm wondering if anybody has a particularly inspiring success story that they could share, because I know it's not everywhere. It's not changing the world, but maybe there's an organization where it's made a difference, where it's really made an impact. Or even a marginal impact.
Well, the challenge here, Robbie, is that I feel like I have so many success stories only to learn later, right? That a success that was gained, took a few steps back. And so I think that's a little bit of the burden that we carry and a little bit of frustration. But I think two stories I can tell. One is as a people professional, one of the things that I require as a part of a job description is the physical requirements portion. And initially, I didn't do this as like an awareness of accessibility. I did it as an awareness of understanding like what the job description needs to say if somebody goes out on some kind of physical leave, or if there's a workers' comp claim or something like that. But when I became part of an organization that I had mentioned earlier that had a fair amount of people on staff who needed accessibility, we had to drastically change the language of the physical requirement section because so much of it was ableist. Like, you need to be able to see, first of all, able, and then see. And it was like, well, no, do you actually need to be able to see the thing? And so we worked probably for a full month, me and a small subcommittee of people in the organization, most of them people with disabilities, to revise that language. And I think at the end, we were just so full of how like we were able to work together and really come up with something that everybody could agree on. And I have used that language, with other clients, and I use that experience with other organizations to say, like, this is what you may have had. First of all, a lot of organizations don't have the physical requirements section of their job descriptions, because I tell that to people and they're like, our job descriptions don't have that. It's not necessary. I'm like, okay, we'll talk about that later. But that was a really great experience, both for me and for them, to be able to see themselves reflected in how we are selling the organization. And then a similar story, we had at a different organization, we had a woman apply for a job who didn't speak English very well. And so we weren't going to say we weren't going to have this woman apply or allow her to be part of the process. What we did is we really changed our questions. We changed the number of people who were involved in the interviews, and we really tried to make it as safe a space for her to not feel like a lot of pressure to have to, repeat herself or to say things a lot. And while we ended up not hiring her, she was very appreciative of like the adjustments that we made to enable her to participate in the process. And that was a big deal for me. It made us feel really good.
Okay, yeah, I consider that a success.
Also, there's one thing I do want to mention about, physical requirements to do a job. It was very interesting. I was reading a job description one time for a trainer, and it said able to stand for long periods of time. And I looked at that and I said, do you really need to be able to stand, or can you sit while you're doing training? What is the requirement of you being able to stand? I don't understand that. So in the same way, you know, the physical requirements, a lot of that, being able to lift 50 pounds. Why?
Yeah.
Why can't I roll it? Why can't I, you know, why can't somebody else do that and I'll do a different job for them? They have to put the marginal requirements and the essential requirements. It seems silly to me to have somebody who's educated who can't lift 50 pounds not being able to get a job. It just seems ridiculous to me.
Yeah, it makes me think of like the colonial system kind of puts us in these boxes like, oh, this is your role, this is your role. And it's like really the best thing is for us to work together. And,
right.
you know, if you can't do it,
and
we all have
I
different
always-
strengths.
And I always say this when I'm doing training, it's about the team. And what can I do to help another person on the team? What can they do to help me so that we can all be productive together?
Yeah, love it. And something that's, I think maybe DEI has reached a critical mass or something in terms of receiving backlash. Just in the past few months, I think it started literally 5 or 6 months ago, states are moving to ban DEI. There's like legislation in a few states, right? How do you respond? Maybe I'll direct this towards Karthi. How do you respond to like, what should the DEI professional community think or do about this? Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, am I muted? No, I think I'm
You're
not.
back.
No.
Okay.
I think, to be honest, I think there are factions within the DEI committee and how each faction wants to approach. And there's definitely one strategy that is, okay, we just need to get a foot in. So let's like essentially tone it down and then get a foot in, and then we'll do the work. And the other side I've seen, and not to say that these are the only two perspectives that exist, just what I've personally experienced. And the other side of this, it's just recognizing that, yeah, if we can tone it down, but that is also, again, going to be on the backs of marginalized people. It is literally us conforming to supremacist culture. Can we morally, ethically do that? And right, and this is happening real time and at all levels. Like, I mean, forget like workplace DEI. We're banning books from schools. We're removing Rosa Parks from history books. We are literally removing facts. We're erasing history. And I struggle with the toned down approach because I am watching the realities and the histories and the struggles of the people that I work with and their ancestors' struggles be erased. Like, this is how it happens, right? When we look through history and think about how in various during different eras, like how people tried to sustain power, and it was like book burning, right? It is restricting access to books, and restricting people to have access to education. And I think the work really has to start there to combat this. And I intentionally use this fighting word, right? Because that is like, I personally feel like, okay, this is an intellectual ideological war. And like, how, if our young children do not get the full understanding of history, forget workplace culture and DEI, right? It starts young. And those are the folks who are the future consumers and future workforce. So I think as people who have responsibility to the younger generations, right? Like my personal goal is to at least, I don't know, do like maybe 0.00001% less damage and like inherit a slightly better world, or pass on a slightly better world than I had inherited from, my ancestors. And I think like this DEI banning is part of a larger movement, and we have to like go to the very, very beginning, and that's access to knowledge, because knowledge is power. And we got to talk about schools and education and representation in history and what our young children are being told.
Wow.
It's fascism. It's fascism on a level that we haven't seen, that we here in America haven't seen since the 30s. And, and I think we are dumbing down this country so that people won't learn, so that people won't understand the history, so that progress does not get made, so the patriarchy can stay in its, so that colonialism, whatever you want to call it, the patriarchy, colonialism can stay where it is. Because if you have an educated world, it's awful. And we fought the fascists in the 30s. So it's really terrible.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there are any economic arguments that would compel people who disagree. I've seen statistics that corporations that are more diverse or considered more inclusive, that they have like a 35% edge on their competitors in terms of performance. I've seen other things like that, like women-led organizations are more flexible often, or things like this. And I'm wondering if any of these arguments would help, just help these big neo-colonial structures, like these giant corporations. Would it help them adopt DEI? Are these arguments, do you use these arguments when you're pitching?
Right, there is a school of thought out there, right, that in order for any kind of DEI work to happen in an organization, that you have to start with the business case. And very often the business case is about their bottom line, right? You're going to have 10% more sales, or you're going to have XYZ% better or different audience, you will have XY% reach, or those kinds of things. And what I have observed is that the problem with an economic business case is that it's so easy for them to kind of meet the line where they get to confirmation bias, right? We diversified our staff, we were quote unquote more inclusive, we did all these things, and our bottom line hasn't changed. Therefore, these things don't actually work to change the bottom line. Meanwhile, it's your business practices. It's the fact that you brought all these people in, but maybe you didn't change any of your practices, procedures, or processes to be more inclusive. Or maybe you haven't changed how you think about selling. Or maybe you did all that diversity, but it exists at the end of your hierarchy in your organization and not at the top end of your organization. And so I try to avoid the business case as much as possible, which is really hard because then you have to make basically a human case, and you think that would be easier, and it's not.
Mm.
You know, very, very often people say we're not here to serve as humans. We're not here to make our employees feel better. Even in nonprofit organizations, like, let's not get it twisted. We're not here for our staff. We're here for the people that we serve, whoever those people are, whether it's for profit or non-for-profit. And, you know, sitting around doing this mushy stuff or getting to know my coworkers better isn't getting us anywhere. Why are we wasting our time and money for this thing? So, like, you struck a nerve, Robbie, because that business case thing has been bugging me for ages.
That's an amazing point. You make a beautiful point.
I mean,
so-
even like,
No, go
sorry,
ahead,
go
Sanae.
ahead.
I was just going to say that, you know, part of what the thing that I've seen work a little bit is really by getting an organization to dig in at the individual level first. So, you know, I don't care if that's 25 people or 250 people, that the first bits of what we do to really dig into any kind of DEI is really to dig into our unconscious bias, to really create that pause point where you can say, I originally thought this, is that something I should be thinking? This happens a lot when people, I've noticed that people will use a cliche and they'll be like, I don't know where that cliche came from. I need to like dig into that now and figure out if that's something I should be saying. So when you get to the point where that kind of impulse is starting to kind of rumble in the organization, that's the only way you're going to be able to get anywhere, because now everybody has created this place where they're willing to say, I'm going to step back from what I initially thought because maybe that's biased and do something different. And if you don't do that, or if you don't build that as a foundation, it's almost impossible to move on from that or to have an effective DEI strategy in an organization.
I think I agree with Edy, actually. Like, even in academia, we are supposed to be the people with ideology and the people who are like in the forefront of all of these things. But still, even there, you see these arguments do not work. Well, there is the economic or the humanistic one. They don't work, you know. For instance, if I can use my organization, university for a little while here, they have tried to do a whole bunch of things, you know, of inclusion, you know, like everybody tried to do after everything that happened in the last few years. But it either goes to an empty void, right? Or it's like, well, we have done our best. We have done our thing. But I am starting to see a little bit, which I'm very hopeful as a human being, and I'm starting to see a little bit of changes, even within the university, for instance, where these things like changing little things like in the syllabi, for instance, changing things where you change the language, you know, not use the able, ask questions instead of these things, bring other different cultures, or even bring things that talk about mental illness, for instance, or invisible disability, or other types of disability, physical. It's changing the course that people are trying to see the word. And I think from the bottom up, it's way better than from the institution down. And I'm going to just conclude with this example that I have that marked me and marked my students. And obviously we were not an organization, but it's like a community where I had a student who was quadriplegic, so she couldn't use her hands and her leg, her feet, but also she could not talk. And I asked students to do presentations. And when it came to her, she said, I cannot talk. How can I do a presentation in front of everybody? And I said, well, instead of doing the presentation and having your PowerPoints, and your PowerPoints have questions rather than presenting different thoughts. And she started asking the questions. And this was such a transformative time that I never forget it. And my students did not forget it, because when we started, nobody wanted to talk to her. Nobody. They're all like just moved away, and they actually, I tried to put them in groups with her. They would not do that. Eventually, I had to force their hands. And they became so friends with her until now. They send me emails and they tell me that they're still talking. And for the first time, when she did this question, she asked them things like this: what do you think about me? What did you think about me when you saw me in the beginning of this class? How did that change throughout the semester? What do you think about me? Do I seem approachable to you? And then she asked a question, because I teach communication. She asked a question about, do you think I communicate? And for the first time, she told me that she believed that she can communicate. She indeed discovered that she can communicate, and she can communicate non-verbally. She never knew that. And that was like such an aha moment for her. And it changed the students, it changed the way that they looked at her. And that was, I think, I am so adamant I believe that we need to work from the bottom up, because I don't know, the institution, so hard to change. I mean, it has to work both ways, but that part of
I love what you've all said. I love the idea of that it's individual work, that the individual really has to be presented with a kind of self-critical framework. I mean, it's kind of like, this is a total cliche. I always say everybody needs therapy. It's kind of like that. It's everybody needs to think. And I don't think we're trained to think critically, or to question ourselves, or to question what an unconscious bias is, or, anyway, that was an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sanae. Jessica?
Also, people a lot of times don't think that they are impacted by disability, even if they don't have one themselves. So what I do in training is I get everybody in a circle, and I do this thing called string theory. And with a ball of yarn, and I say, tell me who in your life has first of all, tell me who you are. It's an introductory exercise. So I tell them, who are you? What do you do here? The first day, and then I say, tell me about somebody in your life with a disability. And I start, and I don't use me, actually. I use a story, a funny story, and some people have shared very heavy things about themselves, and some people share very light things about themselves, and they all have a sibling, or they know somebody, or they have a friend, or whatever it is. And why is it so hard for us to get along with people with disabilities when everybody knows somebody? So that becomes a question that I ask them too, and I thank them for sharing whatever it is. And we talk about it. We talk about why people are so afraid of the subject. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. You all had amazing stories to tell, and I really love your passion, and I wish you luck in your huge project. I'm doing my small part, but you guys are doing really heavy lifting. Stacy, do you want to close us out? I think we're at time.
We are, and I'm so sad about it, because this was such a good discussion, and it's so wonderful to see you all and to hear all your wonderful thoughts on this really important topic. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and helping educate us about this idea of DEI. And thank you everyone who came, really appreciate it. I just had to say that somebody said that Sanae's story gave them chills. So really lovely. And thank you all for being here. We hope that everybody enjoyed the discussion, not just me, although heck, I'm glad I enjoyed it. And that you'll all help to spread the word about the value of DEI. We're going to be sending this video of this event out as in our post-event email. Along with that will be our infographic about this topic, and we do encourage you to share those liberally. We want people to learn about this topic and these wonderful experiences that were shared today. Additionally, in that email we'll send out is going to be a survey that just asks you a couple of questions about the event. It won't take long. And actually right now I have a very quick poll that I'm hoping you all will just take a minute. I know we're a little bit over time, but I very much appreciate it if you would just take a minute and to go ahead. You should see a poll in front of you. Can somebody confirm you see a poll? Yeah, okay, great. So go ahead, and if you would just fill out that poll. We'll give you a couple of minutes to go ahead and do that. Not even a couple of minutes, a minute to go ahead and do that. It's a really quick poll.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'll just mention that I hope that you will take some time to do some positive DEI actions yourself. These might include, for example, sharing our infographic and the video, but also we encourage you watch a social awareness movie, for example. You can learn a lot about somebody else's lived experience by watching movies that relate to them. And so kind of understanding a different perspective than your own and understanding your own privilege. We encourage you also, if you see a problematic situation, there's two strategies you can use for that: calling in or calling out. And calling in is when you invite somebody back in a private space and mention to them that what your concerns are about what happened, or calling out if something is particularly relevant that needs to be called out in a given moment. You can mention something to them right then and there. Of course, with all of these strategies, including all the ones that were discussed today, there's risks associated with them. But of course, the reward is also very important to help with these issues that our panelists so eloquently talked about today. Thank you all for participating in the poll. I very much appreciate that. And our email is going to include that survey. Please do that now as well. I mean, take some time when you get that, just a minute to do that survey as well. Our next event is going to be an Earth Day event. It's in our Celebrate and Create program, which is a children's crafting program. That's on April 22nd from 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. So I encourage you to attend. So folks will be learning, particularly we're going to be talking about food waste at that event. While we're doing a craft, we'll be making a little trinket box. So please come and register for that. All of our events are free, materials are free, and they are shipped free. So sign up for those as soon as possible. Also, to learn more about our other events, please do check out our website at informyourcommunity.org. And not only about the know-it-all panel that you see today, but also other programs that we have. We have movie nights and so many other great things. We're grateful for you all for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, please sure to like and to subscribe. And thank you all for coming. Thank you to our amazing panelists for being here today. I so appreciate your time. Robbie and Tyler and Tech, so appreciate you folks always. Thank you folks very much, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
It was
Bye-bye.
great to meet you
Everybody.
guys.
Me too.